The arrival. Professor Zalax's facial membranes quivered as he activated the neural recording device, his bioluminescent spots pulsing with a mix of resignation and amazement. 300 years of teaching at the galaxy's most prestigious military institution hadn't prepared him for the chaos that 3 human cadets would bring to his perfectly ordered world. Recording session 47B, Professor Zalax speaking, he began, his translator carefully modulating his subsonic frequencies into standard galactic common. Let me be absolutely clear, accepting those human cadets into the Galactic Defense Academy was simultaneously the biggest mistake and most brilliant decision of my career. The professor's secondary nervous system twitched at the memory. The massive crystalline archives of Centaur Prime held countless records of his achievements as senior training director. He had built his reputation on maintaining impossibly high standards, turning the academy into the crown jewel of military education across known space. The Galactic Council's integration mandate seemed reasonable at first, he continued, adjusting the recording device's sensitivity. New species join our community regularly, and most adapt well to our rigorous standards. But humans? His bioluminescent spots flickered rapidly, the equivalent of a derisive snort. Those reckless death worlders from Sol 3. The suggestion seemed like a cosmic joke. He paused the recording, allowing his neural patterns to stabilize. The memory of that first council meeting still triggered his fight-or-flight response. The human ambassadors had stood there, seemingly oblivious to the impossibility of their request, asking that 3 of their cadets be admitted to a program that regularly broke the spirits of the galaxy's finest minds. Computer, resume recording, he commanded. Our curriculum wasn't designed to be impossible, merely to push the boundaries of what was achievable. 10 years of intensive study, divided into 5 critical phases: theoretical quantum physics, advanced xenobiology, tactical simulations, psychic resistance training, and practical combat exercises in varying gravity conditions. His spots darkened as he remembered the humans' reaction to the curriculum overview. While other species representatives typically responded with appropriate awe or trepidation, the human ambassadors had simply nodded, as if he described a routine training regimen. Most species require at least 2 years to complete the basic theoretical framework alone. Commander Bright Spire of the Luminari holds the record for fastest completion, 7 years, 3 months. The quantum physics module alone requires simultaneous comprehension of 15 dimensions. The combat training takes place in gravity fields ranging from 0.1 to 12 standard units. The psychic resistance courses literally reshape neural pathways. Professor Zalax's membrane ridges rose slightly, the equivalent of a human raising their eyebrows. When Mason Drake, Nova Chen, and Rex Thompson first stepped off their transport ship, the entire welcoming committee fell silent. Not out of respect, mind you, but pure, unfiltered shock. He could still picture them clearly: Mason Drake, tall and commanding, with hair the color of a dying star; Nova Chen, moving with uncanny grace despite Centaur Prime's 2.3 standard gravity; and Rex Thompson, wearing that insufferable grin that would soon become legendary throughout the academy. The first sign that we had grossly miscalculated came during orientation. I was explaining our century-old assessment protocols when Cadet Thompson raised his hand and asked, with that same infuriating grin, if our simulations were basically just advanced versions of human video games. The professor's spots pulsed with remembered indignation. I should have recognized the danger signs when they didn't even break a sweat in our higher gravity. Most new arrivals can barely stand, yet these 3 were casually strolling around as if they were on their home world. Their first day of classes had set the tone for everything that would follow. While other students struggled with basic quantum calculations, Nova Chen was already finding shortcuts that even the Academy's AI hadn't discovered. During tactical simulations, Mason Drake displayed an intuitive grasp of multidimensional warfare that left their instructors speechless. And Rex Thompson, well, Thompson approached every challenge like it was some sort of entertaining puzzle rather than a serious academic exercise. Looking back now, I realize we had made a fundamental error in our assessment of human potential. We had analyzed their physical capabilities, their technological advancement, their theoretical knowledge, but we had completely failed to account for their most dangerous characteristic, their absolutely irrational refusal to accept limitations. Professor Zalax paused again, his spots now pulsing in a pattern that indicated deep contemplation. Computer, personal note, still debating whether to include this next observation in the official record. The council might not appreciate the implications. No, it needs to be documented. Resume recording. What we didn't understand, what we couldn't have possibly predicted, was that these 3 humans would not only survive our program, they would completely break it. And in doing so, they would teach us more about the true nature of learning, adaptation, and the nature of the impossible than we had discovered in 10,000 years of galactic civilization. His membrane ridges twitched in what had become an unconscious mimicry of a human smile. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The real chaos began during their first practical combat exercise, when they did something so fundamentally impossible that it forced us to rewrite our basic understanding of tactical doctrine. Computer, end recording segment. The professor's spots flickered one final time as he contemplated the events that would follow. The galaxy would never be the same after what those 3 humans would accomplish in their first year at the academy. And somewhere, deep in his secondary nervous system, Professor Zalax felt an emotion he had never experienced before, anticipation for whatever impossible thing they would do next. The first challenge. Recording session 47B2, Professor Zalax speaking. Computer, mark this segment as classified level Omega. The events I'm about to describe still violate 16 different laws of physics, according to our previous understanding. The professor's spots pulsed with remembered excitement as he settled into his recording chamber. The memory of that first practical combat exercise still sent waves of disbelief through his secondary nervous system. The standard first-year combat assessment takes place in our variable gravity arena. It's a massive facility, capable of generating localized gravity fields ranging from 0 to 12 standard units. The exercise is simple in theory. Students must traverse the arena, retrieve a target object, and return to the starting point. We design it to be completable, but extremely challenging. The previous record was 36 minutes, held by a Proximan warfare specialist. His membrane ridges twitched as he remembered the human's reaction to the briefing. While other students displayed appropriate anxiety, Mason Drake had been studying the arena's structural layout with unervingly focused interest. Nova Chen had been scribbling calculations on her datapad, and Rex Thompson had been grinning that insufferable grin. The exercise began normally enough. The first wave of students performed as expected, struggling against the varying gravity fields, taking careful, measured approaches. Then came the human's turn. Professor Zalax paused the recording, his spots flickering rapidly as he organized his thoughts. Computer, personal note, still uncertain how to describe the next sequence of events without sounding like I've lost my faculties. Resume recording. Mason Drake stepped up first, with Chen and Thompson flanking him. Standard protocol dictates that students attempt the course individually, but when I began to explain this, Thompson interrupted with a question that should have warned us, "Sir, the mission parameters specify retrieving the target and returning safely. They don't explicitly forbid teamwork, correct?" The professor's spots darkened with remembered frustration. He was right, of course. We had never bothered to forbid teamwork because it was obviously impossible to coordinate in varying gravity fields. The neural strain of adjusting to rapid gravity changes makes it difficult enough to manage one's own movements, let alone synchronize with others. I informed them that while technically correct, attempting the course as a team would only result in 3 failures instead of 1. Drake smiled, actually smiled, and said, "Permission to proceed as a team, sir." I granted it, if only to let them learn this lesson the hard way. His membrane ridges rippled with excitement as he reached the crucial moment. What happened next defied every tactical doctrine in our database. Instead of fighting against the gravity variations, they used them. Drake took point, his larger mass serving as an anchor. Chen and Thompson attached themselves to him with what they called climbing ropes, primitive but effective tools from their death world. They moved like a single organism, using the gravity differentials to literally throw each other forward. When they hit a high gravity zone, Drake would brace himself while Chen calculated trajectories. Thompson, being the lightest, would then use the momentum from a lower gravity section to literally launch himself across the high gravity barrier, securing a new anchor point for the others. Professor Zalax's bioluminescence pulsed rapidly as he described the next part. They reached the target in 12 minutes, already an impossible feat, but it was their return journey that truly demonstrated why humans are now classified as a Class X species. The target was a simple crystalline sphere, similar to the ones used in basic energy transmission. Thompson took one look at it and asked, and I quote, "Hey, this thing conducts energy, right?" Before anyone could respond, he had somehow interfaced it with his primitive electrical device, what humans call a smartphone, creating what he termed a makeshift gravity pulse generator. The professor's spots flickered in a pattern indicating both admiration and horror. They used the crystalline sphere's resonance properties, combined with the arena's own gravity field emitters, to create a cascading wave of gravity fluctuations. Chen calculated the precise frequencies needed, while Drake utilized his mass to direct the wave's propagation. They effectively surfed, yes, that's the human term, the gravity wave back to the starting point. Total completion time, 17 minutes, 22 seconds. They didn't just break the record, they shattered our entire understanding of gravity field manipulation. The worst part? Thompson looked disappointed, claiming they could have done it faster if they'd optimized their route better. Professor Zalax paused again, his membrane ridges quivering. Computer, add footnote, the resulting investigation into their methods led to the discovery of 14 new principles of gravitational physics. 3 of our most established theories had to be completely rewritten. And this was just their first practical exercise. The Academy's response was mixed. Half the faculty wanted to expel them immediately for reckless endangerment. The other half wanted to study their methods in detail. Meanwhile, other students were already attempting to replicate their techniques. Within a week, the previous record was broken 4 more times by various species working in teams. His spots pulsed with a mix of pride and resignation. We had designed our curriculum to test individual excellence. The humans showed us that true advancement often comes through collaboration. It was a lesson that would be repeated throughout their time at the Academy, though none of us realized it then. The real crisis came during their first quantum physics examination, when Nova Chen discovered what she called a shortcut through 11-dimensional space. But that's a story that still gives our theoretical physics department collective nervous breakdowns. Computer, end recording segment. The professor's bioluminescence dimmed as he contemplated the changes that would follow. The humans hadn't just completed their first challenge, they had fundamentally altered how the Academy approached teaching itself. And they were just getting started. Computer, personal note, remind me to include a section about the aftermath of what they termed Operation Gravity Surf. The maintenance crews are still finding spatial anomalies in the arena 6 months later. And Thompson's request to try it with antimatter next time should be permanently recorded as an example of why humans require constant supervision. Breaking the rules. Recording session 47B3, Professor Zalax speaking. Computer, apply maximum encryption protocols. What I'm about to describe technically violates the laws of universal constants as defined by the Galactic Scientific Council. The professor's spots pulsed in an erratic pattern as he prepared to document the events of the quantum physics examination. His membrane ridges were still sensitive from the neural feedback he'd experienced during the incident. The standard first-year quantum physics assessment is designed to test students' understanding of multidimensional mathematics and quantum probability manipulation. Students are required to solve a series of increasingly complex quantum state equations while simultaneously maintaining awareness of 15 distinct dimensional planes. His bioluminescence flickered with remembered anxiety. We had modified the standard test chamber to accommodate human neural architecture, though we needn't have bothered. Chen took one look at the quantum visualization matrix and asked, in that unnervingly calm way of hers, whether we had considered applying what she called quantum tunneling principles to the information transfer process itself. I remember explaining, with what I thought was infinite patience, that quantum tunneling was a phenomenon restricted to subatomic particles, not information patterns. She smiled, "They do that entirely too much," and said something that still haunts our theoretical physics department. "But Professor, isn't information just patterns of quantum states anyway?" Professor Zalax paused the recording, his spots pulsing rapidly. Computer, personal note, the next sequence of events resulted in the formation of 3 new branches of quantum mathematics. Mark this segment for review by the Quantum Ethics Committee. Resume recording. Chen didn't just solve the equations, she rewrote them. While we were watching her neural patterns in the standard 15 dimensions, she somehow found what she called a shortcut through dimension 17. A dimension we hadn't even theorized existed. His membrane ridges quivered as he recalled the moment. The monitoring equipment registered her consciousness operating simultaneously in 23-dimensional planes. When we asked how this was possible, she simply shrugged and said she was following the path of least resistance. Apparently, humans have been unknowingly perceiving multiple dimensional planes their entire history, they just call it intuition. But it was Thompson who truly demonstrated why humans are now classified as a Class X cognitive hazard. While we were still trying to comprehend Chen's dimensional shortcuts, he was busy applying her theories to what he called practical applications. He actually managed to create a stable quantum tunnel between his examination chamber and the Academy's cafeteria, because, in his words, he was hungry and didn't want to miss anything interesting. The professor's spots darkened with a mix of horror and admiration. We had to evacuate 3 levels of the Academy when he accidentally connected his quantum tunnel to the coffee machine's power supply. The resulting cascade of quantum probability fields turned the entire cafeteria into what he termed a Schrödinger's lunch scenario, where every possible meal existed simultaneously until someone attempted to eat it. Drake, meanwhile, saw the military applications immediately. He theorized that Chen's dimensional shortcuts could revolutionize faster-than-light travel and secure communications. Within hours, he had drafted preliminary plans for what he called a quantum command network that would allow instantaneous coordination between ships across entire galaxies. Professor Zalax's bioluminescence pulsed in a pattern indicating deep concern. The Academy board convened an emergency session. The humans had effectively rendered our entire quantum physics curriculum obsolete in less than 6 hours. Worse, other students were already attempting to replicate their methods. A group of Arcturian cadets managed to create their own quantum tunnel, though thankfully, they only connected it to their dormitory's entertainment center. We had a choice to make: either expel the humans for violations of known physical laws, or completely restructure our understanding of quantum mechanics. The decision was made for us when the Galactic Science Council reviewed Chen's equations. Her shortcuts didn't actually violate the laws of universal constants, they just operated on a level we hadn't known existed. His membrane ridges twitched in what had become an unconscious imitation of a human smile. The humans had done it again. They hadn't broken the rules, they'd simply shown us that the rules were incomplete. The Academy's response was to create an entirely new department, theoretical human physics. Though I insisted we classify everything under potentially catastrophic innovations instead. But the real crisis came during their xenobiology practical examination. We had assumed, foolishly, in retrospect, that biological sciences would be one area where humans couldn't possibly revolutionize our understanding. We had forgotten their species' peculiar obsession with what they call genetic engineering and extremophile adaptation. The professor's spots pulsed with remembered panic. Thompson's suggestion that we could optimize the Academy's standard environmental suits by incorporating tardigrade DNA should have been our first warning. When Chen started discussing the possibility of borrowing regenerative capabilities from something called an axolotl, we should have shut down the entire lab. But it was Drake's proposal to create what he termed super soldiers, by combining multiple species' adaptive traits that finally forced us to implement new safety protocols. Computer, add urgent notation. The official record should clarify that no actual genetic hybridization occurred during this incident. The simulations alone were enough to violate 16 different sections of the Galactic Genetic Preservation Act. Professor Zalax paused again, his secondary nervous system still twitching from the memory. What made it worse was that their theories were sound. Completely unethical and potentially catastrophic for the gene pool of every known species, but technically feasible. We had to rewrite the entire xenobiology curriculum to include specific prohibitions against what humans call playing God with DNA. But even that paled in comparison to what happened during their psychic resistance training. We had assumed humans were a non-psychic species. We were wrong. They weren't non-psychic, they were something far more dangerous. Something we had never encountered in all our years of galactic exploration. His spots flickered in a pattern that indicated both fear and fascination. Computer, end recording segment. Mark next session as classification level, Omega+. The Council needs to understand exactly what we discovered about human consciousness and its implications for galactic security. The professor's bioluminescence dimmed as he contemplated the next part of his report. The humans hadn't just broken the Academy's rules, they had forced the galaxy to reconsider what was possible. And they were about to reveal something that would change everything. Computer, personal note, include Thompson's quote about quantum tunneling to alternate universes just to find better coffee. The probability management department is still trying to determine if he was joking. The Grand Experiment. Recording session 47B4, Professor Zalax speaking. Computer, implement Omega+ security protocols. What I'm about to describe fundamentally alters our understanding of consciousness itself. The professor's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep ultraviolet, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. The events of the psychic resistance training had forced the Academy to question everything they thought they knew about the nature of sentience. Standard psychic resistance training involves defending one's consciousness against external influence while maintaining mental coherence across multiple probability states. We use scaled telepathic fields to test students' mental fortitude. The strongest psychic species in known space can typically maintain their mental integrity against level 8 interference. His membrane ridges contracted sharply. When we began testing the humans, our equipment registered nothing. Absolutely nothing. No psychic defenses, no telepathic barriers, not even basic mental shielding. We assumed our instruments were malfunctioning. Nova Chen was first in the testing chamber. We started at the lowest setting, barely a whisper of psychic pressure. The monitoring equipment still showed no defenses, yet the telepathic field bounced back. Not blocked, not absorbed, but reflected, as if her mind was a mirror made of quantum possibilities. Professor Zalax's spots pulsed in a complex pattern indicating deep scientific fascination. We increased the power. Level 2, Level 3, all the way to Level 10. The effect remained the same. Chen's consciousness wasn't defending against the telepathic field, it was simultaneously accepting and rejecting every possible psychic interaction, creating what our theorists now call a quantum consciousness state. When we asked her to describe what she was experiencing, she said, and I quote, "It's like having a conversation with yourself, but all your possible selves are talking at once, and you're choosing which ones to listen to." The implications were staggering. Humans weren't non-psychic, they were operating on a fundamentally different level of consciousness. His secondary nervous system trembled as he recalled the next phase. Then came Rex Thompson's test. He approached it with his usual irreverence, asking if he could try something fun. Before we could stop him, he had somehow turned the reflected telepathic field into what he called a psychic feedback loop. The resulting resonance cascade triggered every probability sensor in the facility. The worst part? He was doing it deliberately. Thompson had intuitively grasped the underlying principles of quantum consciousness manipulation and was, in his words, playing around with the settings. He managed to create a stable mental state that existed in multiple probability streams simultaneously, something our most advanced psychic theorists had considered impossible. Professor Zalax paused the recording, his spots flickering rapidly. Computer, personal note, the repair costs for the psychic testing equipment should be classified under acts of impossible science rather than equipment failure. Resume recording. But it was Mason Drake who showed us the true military implications. He didn't just reflect the telepathic fields, he weaponized them. By combining Chen's quantum consciousness state with Thompson's probability manipulation, he created what he termed a tactical probability matrix. He could literally see and choose the most advantageous outcome from infinite possible futures. The professor's membrane ridges quivered with a mixture of awe and terror. In the combat simulation that followed, Drake achieved a perfect victory against our most advanced tactical AI. Not through superior strength or speed, but by always being exactly where the enemy wasn't going to be, attacking precisely when defenses were weakest. He wasn't predicting his opponent's moves, he was selecting the reality where he had already won. The Academy Board's response was unprecedented. For the first time in our history, we created a new classification of sentience, Class X. A designation reserved for species whose cognitive processes defy our current understanding of consciousness itself. His spots pulsed with intense activity as he reached the crucial point. This led to what we now call the grand experiment. Instead of trying to teach the humans to conform to our understanding of physics, psychology, and tactical doctrine, we would let them show us what we had been missing. We transformed their training wing into an experimental think tank, giving them access to problems that had puzzled our greatest minds for centuries. The results were explosive. Sometimes literally. Thompson's attempt to solve our cold fusion equation led to what he called a tiny, well-contained quantum singularity in the physics lab. Chen's solution to faster-than-light communication involved folding spacetime in ways that made our mathematicians question their life choices. And Drake's tactical innovations, well, the military applications are still classified under things we hope our enemies never think of. Professor Zalax's bioluminescence shifted to a deeper frequency. But the most significant breakthrough came when they started teaching other species their methods. It turns out humans weren't unique in their ability to access quantum consciousness states, they were just the first species to do it naturally. Within months, we had students from 42 different species learning to manipulate probability fields through what Thompson called quantum mindfulness meditation. The implications reached far beyond the Academy. The Galactic Council's Science Division had to revise its fundamental theories of consciousness. Our understanding of evolution had to account for the possibility of naturally occurring quantum-aware beings. And our military strategists, they had to face the terrifying possibility that humanity wasn't just a new ally, but a glimpse of what every species might become. His membrane ridges contracted in what had become his equivalent of a thoughtful frown. Computer, add urgent notation, the incident with the quantum consciousness collective that formed spontaneously in the cafeteria should be addressed in a separate report. We're still not sure if it was an accident or another one of Thompson's experiments. But even these revelations didn't prepare us for their final act, the event that would force us to rewrite not just our understanding of physics and consciousness, but of reality itself. It began as a simple end-of-term project and ended with, well, perhaps it's better to explain exactly what happened when three humans decided to optimize the very fabric of spacetime. Professor Zalax's spots dimmed significantly. Computer, end recording segment. Mark next session as classification level, reality hazard. The Council needs to understand that what happened next wasn't just impossible, it was impossible squared. The professor's bioluminescence pulsed one final time as he prepared to document the most extraordinary event in the Academy's history. The humans hadn't just broken the rules of reality, they had proven that reality itself was more flexible than anyone had imagined. Computer, personal note, include Thompson's suggestion about quantum consciousness social media. The ethics committee is still trying to determine if connecting every mind in the galaxy simultaneously would constitute a violation of privacy laws or the creation of a new form of existence. Redefining the impossible. Recording session 47B5, Professor Zalax speaking. Computer, implement reality hazard protocols. What I'm about to describe technically counts as a Class X temporal event with pandimensional implications. The professor's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to a previously unrecorded frequency, one that the Academy's xenobiologists later classified as existential awe. The end-of-term project was supposed to be simple. Students would demonstrate practical applications of their acquired knowledge. Most species submit theoretical papers or conduct minor experiments. The humans, they decided to optimize reality. His membrane ridges rippled with remembered disbelief. It started when Nova Chen noticed what she called an inefficiency in the way our universe handles entropy. She theorized that by combining her quantum shortcuts with Thompson's probability manipulation, they could create a kind of universal debugging system. When they presented their initial proposal, I actually laughed. The idea seemed absurd, even for humans. They wanted to create what they called a reality optimization framework. Drake described it as patching the universe's source code. Thompson, with his usual irreverence, called it turning reality into a modifiable sandbox. Professor Zalax paused, his spots pulsing rapidly. Computer, personal note, the following events have been verified by over 300 senior scientists from 47 species. I am not suffering from temporal psychosis. Resume recording. They began by combining every principle they discovered during their time at the Academy. Chen's quantum dimensional shortcuts provided the framework. Thompson's probability manipulation techniques created the interface. Drake's tactical probability matrices handled the calculations. But they needed something more, something unprecedented. His secondary nervous system quivered as he reached the crucial moment. They requested access to the Academy's quantum mainframe, the most powerful computing system in known space. When we asked why, Thompson grinned and said they needed to compile reality. The scary part? He wasn't joking. The experiment was scheduled for the last day of term. We took every precaution, evacuated non-essential personnel, activated all safety protocols, even had the Galactic Council's emergency response team on standby. In retrospect, we should have realized no safety protocol could contain what they were attempting. The professor's spots darkened to near-infrared. They began by establishing what Chen called a quantum consciousness consensus, linking their minds through the techniques they developed in psychic training. Thompson described it as three-player co-op for reality hacking. Drake handled the strategic overview, ensuring their changes wouldn't collapse the space-time continuum. The first sign that something extraordinary was happening came when our reality monitors detected multiple timeline convergences. Not parallel universes splitting off, timelines actively choosing to merge together. The humans were somehow optimizing causality itself, eliminating what Thompson called redundant probability threads. His membrane ridges contracted sharply. Then they accessed the quantum mainframe. Chen's consciousness interfaced directly with the system, using her dimensional shortcuts to access what she called the universe's API. Thompson began implementing what he termed reality patches, optimizing fundamental forces for better efficiency. Drake's probability matrices ensured each change propagated safely across all dimensions. What happened next? Professor Zalax's spots pulsed erratically. Computer, note for the record, the following sequence of events occurred simultaneously across all observed timelines. They didn't just modify reality, they optimized it. Entropy became more efficient. Quantum uncertainty resolved itself more elegantly. Probability collapsed into actuality with greater precision. The very fabric of spacetime began operating at what Thompson called higher refresh rates. The effects were subtle but profound. Faster-than-light travel became 23% more efficient. Quantum communications gained perfect clarity. Psychic abilities across all species became more stable and controlled. They had essentially debugged the universe's base code. The professor's bioluminescence shifted through multiple frequencies. When it was over, when reality had stabilized in its new, more efficient configuration, we asked them how they had accomplished the impossible. Their response? Chen said they'd simply removed some legacy code that was slowing things down. Thompson mentioned something about updating the universe's operating system. Drake suggested we could achieve even better results with a few more optimization passes. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The humans hadn't just broken our understanding of reality, they had actively improved it. Every scientific principle we'd established over millennia of civilization needed to be re-evaluated. Not because they were wrong, but because they were, as Thompson put it, running on an outdated version. Professor Zalax's spots pulsed with what had become genuine affection. The Academy's response was unique. We couldn't expel them, they had technically fulfilled all project requirements while breaking no stated rules. We couldn't fail them, their project had objectively improved the fundamental operations of reality. In the end, we did the only thing we could, we offered them teaching positions. Their first lecture was titled Reality Optimization 101, Why the Universe Needs Regular Updates. The attendants included beings from every major species in known space. Even the Galactic Council's Science Division sent representatives. The humans had transformed from students into teachers, showing us that the impossible was merely the improbable waiting for someone crazy enough to try it. His membrane ridges formed what had become a permanent human-like smile. Computer, final notation, the decision to accept human cadets into the Academy did more than break our understanding of science, consciousness, and reality. It broke our assumption that we knew what was possible. And in doing so, it opened up possibilities we had never dreamed existed. As for our 3 humans, Chen is now heading the newly formed Department of Quantum Reality Engineering. Thompson runs what he calls the Universe Debug Team, though we officially call it the Department of Universal Optimization. Drake leads the Strategic Probability Command, protecting reality itself from what he terms cosmic security vulnerabilities. The professor's spots pulsed one final time. Computer, end recording series. Add final personal note, Thompson's latest project proposal, titled Reality 2.0, Electric Boogaloo, should probably be reviewed by the Ethics Committee. His suggestion about adding creative mode to certain sectors of spacetime seems unnecessarily risky. Though I have to admit, I'm curious to see what they'll break next. Computer, end final recording. Professor Zalax's bioluminescence dimmed as he contemplated the future. The galaxy would never be the same after what those 3 humans had accomplished. But perhaps that had been the point all along. Sometimes breaking things was the first step to making them better. In the Academy's main hall, a new motto now hung beneath the ancient crest: the impossible is merely the improbable waiting for a human to try it. Below it, someone, presumably Thompson, had added in smaller letters, "Hold my coffee and watch this." The end.